Hello everyone, and this is my review for Monday Night Raw on January the 9th, 2017, and I'm going to go off and say this was a very mixed bag Raw that I would say I did not find thoroughly entertaining for the most part, but was still, but I wouldn't say that it wasn't entertaining in the terms of it did not progress storylines, and it did not do necessarily some of the right things that it needed to do. It's just that there are certain things that, about the show that is becoming very much a drag to go along with everything. First of all, throughout the night, the Stephanie McMahon stuff, her constantly, trying to be a face, but then being a complete heel later in the show, and then the way she was talking with Mick at the beginning of the show about the performance review, and then it's like, everything's based off of this. Everything in this performance review is based off of the aspect of Mick Foley being able to produce The Undertaker throughout the entire show. And you did get a nice little segment inside of there where Braun Strowman and Seth Rollins interrupted inside of that performance review, and then both of them began to brawl, which went on into what they were beginning the show with, which was going to be initially teasing they teased Roman Reigns versus Chris Jericho and Kevin Owens in the handicap match for the U.S. title. Braun Strowman comes out, interferes, and eventually Seth Rollins comes out and interferes to go along with it. This prompts Stephanie to make a match between Braun and Rollins, which the two of them put on a pretty good match. I would go off and say they put on a pretty good match, but they did not necessarily, it didn't really necessarily mean anything in the end. The match ends in double count out, kind of protecting both guys in that sense of everything. And that they kind of like, I get what they're going for. They're trying to protect both guys. Both guys are going to be in the Rumble. You got to keep them both strong. You can't necessarily have one beating the other. But it just didn't really come off all that well in the end. I thought the match itself was fine, and I get where they were going with everything, but it didn't really come off all that well in the end. One thing that I really liked about this show, which was pretty much the Cruiserweight division stuff. The Cruiserweight division, you had Jack Gallagher going up against Drew Gulak. Gallagher wins that match, and then, which was a decent match itself, but then they continue on his feud with Arya Daivari, where they had a gentleman's duel a couple weeks ago on 205 Live. Now Jack Gallagher has proclaimed a parlay, basically something where he would say, they're gonna try to talk everything out before going into what he would call fisticuffs. I just love the Jack Gallagher character. He keeps everything in like an old gentlemanly style way. It's like the next thing that they need to do with him is almost dress him in Dudley gear from Street Fighter 3 and Street Fighter 4, and it would come off almost perfect in that sense of everything. But that's just for joking aspect. I like where they go with the Jack Gallagher character. I like how he is presented, and I like how everything goes. So with that being said, like I said, that was one thing I really liked, and that was from the Cruiserweight division. The other thing I liked, which was also from the Cruiserweight division, was the Neville-Lince Dorado match, where Neville goes over, but he's showing off more of his heel persona in every way, shape, or form. He doesn't he keeps himself athletic throughout the entire match, but he doesn't do a lot of the high flying. He doesn't do a lot of the other stuff that he used to do when he was a face. He's completely reinvented his character, and even reinvented his ring style to be more prominent as a heel, and I like where they go with everything here. That was definitely a good spot on the show. You even had a thing where they were continuing on this Noam Dar Cedric Alexander feud where you have a weird spot where Alicia Fox meets up with Noam Dar and then takes him over and kisses him, and then immediately says, it's like, Cedric was right, you can't handle a real woman, and then walks off. So they continue the storyline, like they're continuing storylines in some way, shape, or form, even albeit in a weird way like that. It still seemed to come off rather well. But let's go into the two main other aspects of the show, which were the Shawn Michaels appearance and the Undertaker appearance. The Shawn Michaels appearance. No, it wasn't good. I did not like what they did with Shawn Michaels in this case. Now, that usually they use Rusev with the people who come in for the one-time offs and everything in that sense, and it comes off well most of the times. But here, it did not come off well at all. It felt like a very awkward promo from Shawn Michaels, and also him promoting his movie, and then it came off as another awkward type promo from Rusev, and then Enzo and Cass come out, and you figure it would become better, but it just felt like it was continually getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse with the jokes that they were doing and everything in that sense. And it's just an aspect, I think, of how they booked this, not booked this promo, but booked this feud in general with him, with Enzo and Cass and Rusev. Like, you feel like every time Enzo gets beaten down from Rusev and Jinder Mahal and everything in that sense, he kind of deserves it. In some way, shape, or form. Like, the only aspect of the fact that he is a face is the fact that he's getting cheered in some way, shape, or form, and it just isn't coming off all that well in the end. And it's really hard to say where they really need to go with this side of everything. But I'm getting to the point of not necessarily caring all that much with this feud, and it just did not, like, this promo itself did not come off well. It led to a match with Jinder Mahal and Big Cass. The match was kind of meh, and you did get the obligatory super kick from Shawn Michaels to Rusev in there to go along with it. But overall, those two segments, they did not pan out. They did not really work for me in any way, shape, or form. Now for the Undertaker appearance. A little bit better. His promo basically said he was going to be in the Royal Rumble and everything in that sense. He even plays it off as, he even plays an aspect of the reasoning that he's on Raw is that he goes and does as he feels. He goes to either show however he feels. If he wants to appear on Raw, he appears on Raw. If he wants to appear on SmackDown, he appears on SmackDown. And I get that. I get that aspect of it, and I like where they went with everything there. And I did like the aspect of the announcement of him being in the Royal Rumble match as well. I did like that segment a lot more than the Shawn Michaels one. The only aspect that was really a down with it was the beginnings part, where you had Mick Foley and Stephanie McMahon out there, and it looked like Stephanie was going to fire Mick Foley for not producing The Undertaker or something in that sense, and then The Undertaker appears. Like, there was an up to that, but there was also a down to that. I just didn't necessarily fully like it in the end. You also have this continuation with Gallows and Anderson going up against Cesaro and Sheamus. You had Anderson up against Cesaro last week. This week you had Gallows versus Sheamus, which was also a fine match, and it basically is continuing on this feud. I kind of like where they're going with it. I like the dynamic of Cesaro and Anderson on the commentary booth to go along with everything. I thought that ended up working out quite well to go along with it, and I am kind of liking where they're going with that particular feud. You had the New Day coming out. You also had Titus O'Neil out there as well. And they played off this whole aspect that he was trying to, like, Titus O'Neil was going to go for redemption and everything like that, and try to be a part of the New Day and everything. But it ended up being the keg carry thing, and they showed this funny video beforehand and everything in that sense. And again, I don't know where they're really going with this, because last week Titus O'Neil kind of came off as almost babyfacious, and then the babyfaces insulted him throughout the entire aspect, and that's what it looks like. It's like we're playing role reversal. Like, the heels are actually the faces, at least in this case, and the faces are the heels in that sense. Like, The New Day continually dog Titus and dog Titus and dog Titus and dog Titus, and well, like, are they trying to turn him face? I don't know what they're trying to do in here. This did make a match with Kofi Kingston and Titus O'Neil. The match itself was fine. Typical New Day stuff inside of the match, and it was okay. It was an okay match in the end. You also had promos backstage with Bayley and Sasha Banks, where Charlotte interrupts, and then eventually Nia comes in as well, and Nia and Charlotte beat down both Bayley and Sasha Banks to go along with it. But to go along with that aspect, Nia shows another side of herself as being kind of her own being, that she backs up Charlotte into one of the what is it, carrying cases, or whatever they call those the rolling cases that they had there, and it did give like a little extra dynamic to that to go along with it, to say, oh, that Nia is eventually going to be going after Charlotte in some way, shape, or form. You had a backstage promo again with Sasha Banks, Bayley, and Stephanie, where they were trying to set up a match for next week, but Stephanie kicks into heel mode again in this case. Like I said, she switches between heel and face in this show on a couple of occasions to go along with all the stuff that you saw, and says she doesn't care that Sasha's not like 100%. You get the match this week or you don't get it at all. They take the match. And again, the match with Bayley and Sasha against Nia and Charlotte, I thought was a fine match. The match did what it needed to do. It's finally kind of putting Bayley into this underdog type role, where she had been winning matches beforehand, almost on the left and right aspect, but now she's kind of getting beaten down. They even played the dynamic because, like, Sasha was in there for a short period of time, then Bayley comes into the match, and then she's pretty much working the entire match herself after that, because Sasha's not 100% or in every way, shape, or form. I thought this came off quite well, and it did what it needed to do. They have Nia go over Bayley in this one. Not 100% on why they should go there. Actually, I do kind of like that aspect of it as well. It does, again, like I said, it puts Bayley in that underdog and having to come back type role in some way, shape, or form, and they're working on that a little bit more as they're leading into the Rumble and everything in that sense. So I kind of liked where they went with that. This brings me into the main event of the night, which was Roman Reigns versus Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho. They teased the handicap match earlier in the show, but then they do it as the main event of the show. This match, the match was fine, but again, I don't necessarily find it as a full-on entertaining thing, because we've seen so many different variations between Kevin Owens, Chris Jericho, and Roman Reigns over the past month and a half, that this is like, I'm kind of growing numb to it, and it's not necessarily it's not. I'm not saying that the match was bad by any stretch of the imagination, and how they worked the match, and the aspect that Chris Jericho goes over and the U.S. title changes hands in here was necessarily a bad thing. It actually works. It's just, it feels like they could have gotten to this point much sooner, and they could have gone in a different direction with it and leading into the Rumble, instead of us having like the last month and a half that you had some way, shape, or form Roman Reigns in a match with Kevin Owens or Chris Jericho, or like Seth Rollins being in there as a tag team, or a one-on-one match, or anything in that sense. But in the end, that's how I feel. Like, the aspect of Chris Jericho going over, I think is perfectly fine. The aspect of him getting the U.S. title, I think is perfectly fine. It works for the story and everything in that sense. But in the end, we've seen so many different variations of it throughout the last month and a half, that you're growing numb to it. And like I said, and this is all leading to a one-on-one match with Kevin Owens and Roman Reigns, which we've already seen in the last month. And I don't mean just off of the pay-per-view match. I mean, at Roadblock. I mean, actually on Raw as well, to go along with it. So it's an aspect of that. Like I said, I felt like that was fine in the end, but I've grown a little bit numb to the aspect of the pairings of Owens and Jericho going up against Reigns in any way, shape, or form. In that sense, that I don't think this one paid off the way that I feel like it should have in the end. I do like I said, I like the aspect of that it taking a lot to take down Roman Reigns. I like the aspect of Jericho going over clean in the end because it was a handicap match to go along with it. So technically he goes over clean to go on that side of everything. So I feel like certain things worked, but I've grown numb to the match combinations that it didn't do as much for me as, say, it would have if this happened a couple weeks ago or something in that sense. Of everything. So, yeah, overall, this week's Raw, I like I said, there was good points to Raw, there was bad points to Raw this week, but overall, I can't really say I necessarily fully liked it, but like I said, they did do some good progression and storylines. It's just certain other things that they've been doing with the show itself that made it come off as not as good as it probably could have been in the end. So with that being said, that is my review this week for Monday Night Raw. I thank you guys for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.